Hey, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Thank you for joining me in this new painting demo. Today I'm going to talk about the process of this misty morning painting. So I took this photo last year during the winter. During the winter here in the Pacific Northwest, we got some heavy fog in the morning from time to time. And those type of scenery is always wonderful to look at because it just gives out so much depth. And to me, watercolor is one of the most natural medium to paint atmosphere. And this particular scenery is not the easiest scene to tackle because most of the things in this scenery is covered in fog. So whenever things are covered in fog, even like the brick building on the right, the drawing that I'm doing right now, the contrast is really not that big. So a lot of the dark and light is a lot less contrasty, so we have to make the value shift a lot more subtle. So we'll talk about that when I start painting. Right now I'm just doing some drawings. So right off the bat you see that I recomposed the image a little bit. In the photo you see there's a lot of foreground there. It's actually a little bit too much, so we should crop the image a little bit so that the building can look a little bit better. So I did crop in just a little bit, but I really like the yellow curb and that yellow pole in the foreground, so I decided to keep that. So what I did is I rearranged the car a little bit so you can see the car on the right is a lot more closer to us. So that shrinks the foreground just a little bit, so we have less awkward empty space. So the perspective in this drawing is also a little bit tricky. So I shrink the car down a little bit, the car on the left, so it conveys a little bit more distance. The road actually turned a little bit in the middle ground and the background, so I actually need to kind of eyeball that. So here comes the first wash. The first wash is basically just the color of the light. So in this case, I am just painting the overall tone of the mist. The mist may look really bright, really light, but it actually has a little bit of value in it. So I also paint the street light, and I'm going to paint the car light wet onto wet just so that I have this glow in it. So as I move down, I change the color a little bit warmer and also just a little bit darker. And I paint around some highlight, but I try not to stay on those for too long because I really want a nice clean wash. So from top to bottom, I tilt my paper just a little bit so it will have a nice consistent wash throughout. And since the paper is still quite moist, I paint some colors wet onto wet. So the bright color of the street sign, the red awning, the tail light of the car, and the headlight of the car. So I re-wet the paper after it is completely dry with just clean water because I want to start to do some wet onto wet with the distance stuff. I can try to do that during the first wash, but I actually want a little bit more time, so I just re-wet the surface. And now I start to paint the distant buildings, distant elements that's within the fog. So as you can see, way in the distance, everything is really pushed back and subtle. So a lot of wet on wet shapes. So they are soft and they don't have very defined edges. And when you do wet onto wet just right, this is what you are going to get. So this is why I say watercolor is one of the most natural medium to paint atmosphere because it happens naturally and it happens within the water, and you don't have to blend like other mediums by hand. If you're painting oil or acrylic, you need to create the soft edges by hand. While in watercolor here, it kind of forms naturally when you do wet onto wet. So painting some distant dry trees, using the tip of the brush to get that control shape. And I just continue to wash down onto the road. And while it is still wet, I can just add more paint. I can keep adding more paint adding drier paints as it gets drier so that the shape from a very misty background and I start to pull them forward into the midground. So like I said in other video before, you react to the stages of wetness in your painting. Work with watercolor, not try to control it. So now I'm using a smaller brush to paint some branches, and as you can see, I'm starting to get dry brush marks. So that means that the paper is starting to dry, which means that I can start to work on the shapes that I want it to be a little bit more clear. So the shapes, the object that I'm painting right now, they are a little bit more clear. They are not all the way into the fog anymore. So when the paper is still very wet, I work on the background because all the shapes are going to be very soft. And as the paper is starting to dry, I start to paint the shape that's going to be a little bit more clear and start to paint things in the middle ground and eventually foreground. And that's what's fun about watercolor. It's really dynamic and almost kind of interactive in a way because you are interacting with the property of watercolor. You're interacting with the paint and the drying time. So I mix a warm color and start to paint that brick building. And saying that I'm painting a brick building, I'm not painting a single brick because it's really far away. And if you try to paint every single brick, that's just not going to work well. And it's not really necessary for us to do that anyways. But I paint around the window and the white sign on the wall of the building, a little bit of wet onto wet. This is somewhat of a big shape, so we do need enough mixture and try to get it done in one go. This single shape is one wash. Like I always said, one wash, one shape. So we're finishing up the building and I start to mix a little bit darker colors and started painting those bushes and the tree in front of the building wet onto wet. If you look at the photo, those trees, because of the fog, they look kind of blurry too. So in this misty scenery, we do a lot of wet onto wet. And if we want that kind of lost and found edges, we really need to utilize the wetness of the paper as well as mixing the right mixture with it. So the paper is a little bit moist and you will mix a mixture that's a little bit drier so it retain its shape when you paint it, but it also bleed out just enough to make it feel soft. So here I'm starting to paint the ground and also connect that with the bottom of the car, and I just work my way down to the foreground. Now the foreground is not dark enough, so I need to mix a little bit more mixture and do some wet onto wet, and also just add a little bit of the soft textures on the street. The street is not perfectly the same color and the same value, so have a little bit of variation, make it look a little bit dirty here and there. That can make the painting feel more alive. So now I am painting the yellow curb and that yellow pole. Because the whole scenery is in the fog and mostly pretty muted, so if we have some saturated color popping out, it's going to give us some visual interest and some visual impact. And this will also help us to establish the depths. We have something that's darker and more saturated in the foreground. That's going to really push the depths, especially against the more muted color, the softer background. So here I'm adding some dark details in the corner of the curb. These are some dirt, some dead leaves that's being swept and gathered in the corner of the curb. So if we add that, that just add a little bit more dimensionality and some textures. A little bit of detail goes a long way. It just adds more believability. And you don't need to go into painting too much detail. You just need a little hints of that. As long as the viewer acknowledge that you see those details and you pay those attention, you can sell the effect very, very easily. So I'm painting the building on the left, which is also a brick building with this red awning. And again, the red is pretty muted since it's behind the fog. You don't want to paint a very saturated color in that middle ground and the background all of a sudden. So at this stage, everything is pretty much in place. So now is the time to start to add more dark values on top of what we already have. And again, I'm working with the dry time of the paper. So places like in the building, in the middle ground where most of the wash are dry, I can start to paint some sharper shapes. So like this restaurant sign, which is mostly just black, and I paint around the white text and the graphic. Again, just a very, very quick hint of the detail. And I'm going to mix a dark value for the side of the building. We do have a light side and a dark side on the building, so we need to paint the dark side in just to show the form and the structure of the building. So now we can read the building structure and where is it facing. And I connect the dark to the car in the middle ground, the bottom of the car. Start to add just some more contrast on that. So the bottom of the car, the tire, the bottom of the bumper, and the occluded shadow on the bottom of the car. That little bit of darkness anchors the car down on the road, so it feels like the car is on the surface. Also pay attention to the shape of the car. The ratio should be just right. How much is the windshield, how much is the body, the bumper of the car, and the wheel, the tire. Even though car is not the biggest part of the painting, there's a lot of subtle shapes that we really need to look into it. A lot of time I try to look at masters painting and really study the shape that they paint, how they paint cars, figures, and buildings and things like that. How did they interpret those with their own visual language and shapes? And that's what makes masters painting look different. It's the shape. They are able to paint very, very good looking shapes. And that's something come with experience. But as you paint, I encourage you to really look at masters painting, how they paint a certain shape, and try to learn from those. That's certainly how I learned to paint, and that's certainly what I'm trying to get better at as well. So I'm finishing up painting rapidly, giving a layer of glaze over the foreground. Try to make the road just a little bit darker. Again, watercolor dry lighter, so a lot of time when you put down a value, you think that's dark enough, but when it's dry, it's going to dry a lot lighter, especially when you do wet onto wet. The wetter your wash is, the lighter it's going to dry. So I need to constantly go back and make things a little bit darker as needed. And of course, with enough practice, you can make the right judgment of value the first time you paint. So you will compensate how much lighter it's going to get after it's dry. But sometimes I still make the wrong judgment and make things a little bit too light. So I will have to go back and darken certain things. But when in doubt, I will say it's safer to make things a little bit lighter because you can always darken them later. But if you make something a little bit too dark in the very beginning, it's very hard to make them lighter. So now I'm adding a little bit more dark in some of the areas. Adding some dark will make things a little bit more punchy and make some stuff pops out a little bit more. So in this case, we really need to be careful not to darken too many things, especially in the middle ground and the background. Adding some white gouache to make some light a little bit lighter So the tail light and the street light and the headlight. And now after it's completely dry, I find the contrast still a little bit too much, so I decided to do an overall glaze. So by doing the glaze, I paint around some of the highlight area like the headlight and the tail light and start to darken some of the white areas. So by darken the overall paintings and leave out the headlight and the tail light in places like that, the lights start to look much brighter and those lights just pops, and that's the effect that I'm looking for. So I took a little bit of risk and glaze over the whole painting, but I think the risk is worth taken because it really makes the whole painting looks even more misty and those light even brighter. And here's the finished painting. I really like how it turns out. I like how quiet this misty morning scenery looks. I hope you also enjoy this painting and the process that I share with you. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Go to my website at Cafe Watercolor, sign up and download my Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide. Hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. I am Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you next time.